If you're thinking about moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, then you would be moving to one of the most dynamic cities in the nation and the largest metro in North Carolina. If that's you, be sure to grab a pen and a notepad and take down some notes because this right here is the ultimate relocation guide for Charlotte, North Carolina. Moving to a new city or state can be completely overwhelming. And if you're anything like me, your head is filled with questions that you need to get answered before you can make the move. Questions like, is Charlotte a good city to live in? What are the best neighborhoods? Is Charlotte safe? Just how bad is the traffic and how long will my commute actually take? What is the cost of living? What are the schools like in Charlotte? What's the downside to living in Charlotte? And many, many more. Right now, you're probably wondering how I read your mind and knew all the questions you had about moving to this area. Well, 6 years ago, my family and I lived in a small town called Hubbard, Ohio, and we were living in our forever home. We had no plans to leave Ohio, even to leave Hubbard. We were very happy where we were, and we had only been in our house for a little over 2 years. At that time, I was a teacher for an online charter school, and my school closed abruptly, and I was forced with the decision to either continue looking for jobs in Ohio or consider a move to another state. Well, if you know anything about January in Ohio, there's one four-letter word that is probably coming to mind right now, and that is snow. My husband Jason looked at me and said, "Why don't we consider a move somewhere where snow is not a problem?" And so our search began. When it was all said and done, we were planning a move to the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And trust me, I had all the same questions that you do. We've now been here for over 5 years and we love it, but it hasn't come without its challenges. And my goal with this video is to demystify the process and answer some of your questions so that you can make an educated decision when you're making your next move. Be sure to bookmark this video because we're going to be covering why Charlotte, neighborhood overview, cost of living, employment, lifestyle and recreation, climate, pros and cons of living in Charlotte, and maybe even some moving tips. If we haven't met before, I am Christen, a licensed real estate agent in North and South Carolina. I help people just like you buy, sell, invest, and relocate to Charlotte, North Carolina. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. You can call, text, or email. All of my information is down in the description below. Heck, there's even a link to my Calendly so that you can schedule an appointment with me and we can go over all of your personal questions about moving to Charlotte. I know it's a big decision and I'm here to help. First, let me answer the question for you, why Charlotte? Well, Charlotte is one of the most popular places to live in the U.S. according to Forbes. Today, the greater Charlotte region is home to 2.6 million people, and they're here for a reason. For professionals in banking, fintech, and other financial and related industries, the Queen City is the place to be. Charlotte is the banking headquarters for Bank of America and a financial center for the United States in the number 2 position behind New York City. Charlotte is North Carolina's largest city and ranks as one of the best places to live in the United States, as well as consistently being recognized as one of the top travel destinations in the Carolinas. The Charlotte Douglas International Airport is one of the busiest airports in the nation and is currently experiencing an expansion project. What makes Charlotte so amazing? I'm tempted to say everything because truthfully, Charlotte has a lot to offer everyone no matter what you're looking for and what you love. But let's narrow it down and talk about some of the highlights. First, let's talk about the restaurant and bar scene. From restaurants serving up every kind of cuisine you can think of, from down-home Southern to international food. Bars and restaurants, major sporting events, museums, to the great outdoors. Charlotte truly does have it all. We have murals and public art installations, art museums, Broadway shows, plays, and live music. Lots and lots of different venues if you're into the art or music scenes. Or if you're more into the great outdoors, we've got you covered on that front too. We've got tons of trails, greenways, parks, and gardens to explore. In fact, Mecklenburg County has 52 miles of developed greenway trails. Whether you're in Uptown or the neighboring suburbs, you're also going to find tons of parks and gardens to enjoy. And another thing that Charlotte does right is sports. The Queen City's got you covered whether you prefer football, baseball, basketball, hockey, soccer, NASCAR. I mean, literally the list goes on, and you can find all of the sports events you love here in Charlotte. Our newest sports team is the Charlotte FC Major League Soccer team. And I've only scratched the surface. I want you to know that Charlotte has so much to give to its residents. And if you're thinking about moving here, I think you're going to find something you love too. Now, before we jump into our next segment, I want to mention that you can find my Charlotte relocation guide down in the description below. There's a link for you and you can view the whole presentation. And if you have any questions about it, simply reach out. When you're planning a move to the Queen City, one of the first questions that comes up is, where in the Charlotte region do you want to live? And I always bring this back to lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle do you want to have when you live here? And that's going to make a big difference on where you want to live. For instance, if you want to be able to live in a place where you can walk to the stores and get on public transportation and have everything very close together and compact, you're going to be wanting to look at Uptown. Uptown is our downtown in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's where you're going to find that urban feel, that city vibe, and everything is going to be very compact and close together. You're going to find the public transportation is easiest to access, and you're going to be able to, if you wanted to walk or ride a bike or a scooter to doctor's appointments, grocery stores, and things like that, this is going to be your best bet. As you go further and further out from the city, it becomes much more car dependent. So if you're moving here from a place where you did not have to own a car, then you need to make that consideration when you're planning your move to Charlotte. Since we're talking about Uptown, let's talk about the 4 wards. So when you go to the map of Uptown, what you're going to see is that Tryon and Trade divide the city into 4 quadrants, and we call them wards. So first ward is going to be your eastern quadrant, second ward is going to be your southern, third ward is going to be your western, and then fourth ward is going to be the northern quadrant. If you would like to live in Uptown, be sure to focus your attention on the 4 wards section in the relocation guide. But next up, I want to talk about lake life, because a lot of people, when they move to Charlotte, are trying to get to the lakes. Well, we have kind of like 3 main lakes that you're going to be thinking about. Lake Norman is going to be the biggest. Lake Norman covers 520 miles of shoreline and spans across 4 counties. So you will have pieces of Mecklenburg, Iredell, Lincoln, and Catawba counties all around Lake Norman. And if you want to live close to Lake Norman, that's gonna come with a very hefty price tag. Probably the 3 most popular towns on Lake Norman that are going to attract people are Huntersville, Cornelius, and Davidson. Those are all on the eastern shore. So a lot of times when you hear people saying they live near Lake Norman, those are the 3 towns that are the most popular and therefore probably the most expensive. But there are other Lake Norman towns as well. Mooresville, Troutman, Sherrills Ford, Stanley, and Denver are all along that coast of Lake Norman. Lake Wylie is a great alternative if the Lake Norman price tag is a little too high. Lake Wylie can save you a few dollars. It really spans across the border of North and South Carolina. So on the North Carolina side, you might be looking more along the Steel Creek area. And if you jump into South Carolina, there's actually Lake Wylie, Tega Cay, so lots of different places there. Some very popular communities that attract people to Lake Wylie are Tega Cay, the Sanctuary, River Hills, Bearwick, and the Palisades. So those are some very popular spots to go to. And like I said, it might save you a few dollars off of that Lake Norman price tag. If you want to live near Mountain Island Lake, then you are going to be very close to the city. This is actually the closest lake to Uptown. If you want to live near here, you're probably going to be right in that Charlotte area. If living in Charlotte doesn't suit you, there are 7 counties surrounding Mecklenburg County that you might be interested in. And I help people buy, sell, invest, and relocate in all of those counties as well. So just briefly, we're going to be talking about Union County, Cabarrus County, Gaston County, Iredell County, Lancaster County, Lincoln County, and York County. Of those, York County and Lancaster County are in South Carolina, and all of the rest are in North Carolina. So next up, we're going to take a look at my Charlotte map so that you can see exactly where all these counties are and where you might want to make your home. As we're looking at our map of Charlotte, I just want to draw your attention to a couple of the more popular destinations for people who are relocating to the Charlotte area. Lake Norman tends to be one of the first places people ask me about because the lake does offer a different lifestyle to people, and a lot of times people are really attracted to water. So besides just having water fun and summer fun, this is the largest man-made lake in the Carolinas, and it's bringing people to the area year round. So there's lots of things to do from January to December, all year round. There's over 32,000 acres of surface coverage and 520 miles of shoreline. So this lake was created by Duke Energy, and it still provides electricity to the Piedmont regions of the Carolinas today. The banks of the lake lie in 4 counties, like I mentioned: Iredell, Catawba, Mecklenburg, and Lincoln. Some of the most popular communities people are drawn to in the Lake Norman area are Davidson, Cornelius, Huntersville, Mooresville, Denver. At Lake Norman, you can do all of your fun lake activities like boating, fishing, swimming, water sports. You can go to the beach. You can visit Lake Norman State Park. It's one of the biggest attractions on Lake Norman. And then you can also do land activities like camping, hiking, and mountain biking. There are also a couple companies that offer like party pontoons and things like that. So definitely something to think about if you really love that lake life and you don't have a boat of your own. And of course, I have to mention some of the favorite waterfront restaurants: Hello Sailor and Port City Club. Definitely check those out if you're in the Lake Norman area. If you find yourself traveling a lot, if that is something that you do commonly and you need to get access to the airport pretty regularly, then you might use the airport as your focal point. So the airport is over here on the western side of Charlotte, very close to Uptown. If you look here, it's really, really accessible to Uptown. So a lot of big cities, their airport is still pretty far from the city, and that is not the case with Charlotte. It's very close. So if you need easy access to the Charlotte Douglas Airport, you might want to focus on living near Belmont or Steel Creek, or even Stanley. Stanley is maybe about a 20-minute drive from the airport. Another place I get asked about a lot is Fort Mill. Now, Fort Mill is in South Carolina, but it's still not going to be such a huge commute to Uptown. So if you're working in the city, it's still not that bad of a commute. You might be looking at 40 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on traffic. So a lot of people really like Fort Mill. One of the biggest reasons is that they have one of the highest rated school districts, not only in the state of South Carolina, but also in the Charlotte area. Over on the southeastern end of Mecklenburg County, you'll find Matthews. Now, Matthews is a bustling North Carolina city of over 30,000 people. It attracts people because it has a lower cost of living, but is still very, very close to Charlotte, and it's very easily accessible. Matthews has a very old history as a railroad town and actually used to be called Stumptown, but Matthews has a really cool way of preserving its past in various ways. So you can see a lot of history if you visit Matthews. They also have several buildings on the National Register of Historic Places. Beyond history, Matthews is a place of pretty parks and great outdoor spaces. They have 15 different park facilities. They have sports fields, courts, playgrounds, picnic areas, community gardens, recreation centers, various walking paths, and even a couple greenway trails. And of course, I've got to mention the food scene in Matthews. If you happen to be visiting or if you're thinking about moving here, be sure to check out the Jekyll and Hyde Tap House and Grill and the Flying Biscuit Cafe. And I've certainly got to mention Union County. Union County is where my family moved when we moved to the Charlotte area. And so it is my biased opinion that it is one of the best counties in the Charlotte area. In Union County, you're going to find Indian Trail, which is the largest town in Union County. You'll also find Monroe, which is the county seat, and Wesley Chapel, Weddington, Waxhaw, Unionville, Marshville, Wingate. So tons and tons of places, many unincorporated areas as well. One of the things that draws people to Union County is that the taxes are lower than in the neighboring Mecklenburg County. So it does have that attractive quality going for it. So just like I mentioned earlier, if you're thinking about moving to the Charlotte area, one of the first things that's going to come up is where in the Charlotte region you're going to settle down. And I think it all boils down to what kind of life you want to live when you're here. So think about the things you love, think about the things you need to be nearby, think about commute. Those are all important factors. So if you have something in mind that you would like to ask questions about, you know how to reach me. My information's on the screen. Really quickly, let me draw your attention back to the relocation guide, which again is linked down in the description below. If you go to this page here, you're going to find all the different areas and communities in the Charlotte region. Any that you see underlined are going to be linked to a YouTube video where we focused on that town. So it is a work in progress. We're still working on this even today. So it might look different when you're looking at this video, but just keep in mind that if you have questions about a particular town, you can reach out and I would love to help with those questions. Now, when it comes to the cost of living in Charlotte, North Carolina, you'll be glad to know we are actually less expensive than the national average. What that means for you is that Charlotte, North Carolina is a relatively affordable place to live. If we look at this graph from pay scale, you can see we're lower than the national average overall and on every category they measure: housing, utilities, groceries, and transportation. What I would recommend that you do is go to payscale.com and put in the city that you're moving from and put in the city that you're moving to, as well as your annual salary, and it will actually calculate how far your dollars will go in your new city. In my example that I just did, I put in San Francisco to Charlotte. If you made $120,000 in San Francisco, you would only have to make $65,705 in Charlotte to maintain the same standard of living. Another great calculator you can look at is Forbes, and it's basically the same thing. You put in your pre-tax household income, your starting city, and where you want to move, and calculate, and it will let you know how much money you need to make in your new city to match the same standard of living, and it tells you how much lower or higher the cost of living is in the new city. Let's jump into a little bit more detailed look at housing. As you know, I'm a real estate agent here in the Charlotte area. So if you're thinking about buying, selling, investing, and relocating in the Charlotte area, reach out. My information is on the screen for you. But I would also recommend, if you're thinking about moving in another area, still reach out. I have an extensive referral network. I know real estate agents all over the world, and I might be able to put you in touch with someone amazing wherever you are looking to buy or sell. So let's go ahead and take a look. This is from redfin.com, and what you see here in the graph, Charlotte is in the black and the United States is in that yellowish orangish color. And you can see that for housing alone, we have pretty consistently been under the national average, which is good news. If you're thinking about moving here, then that kind of lends to the affordability factor of living in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I always like to mention how the migration patterns are going. If you look at this image here, we can see who is moving to Charlotte, and we can take a look at this graph. People are moving to Charlotte from New York, Washington, D.C., LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, Atlanta, San Diego, Boston, and Seattle. That's the top 10 cities people are moving to Charlotte from. So if you're coming from one of those cities and moving to Charlotte, please reach out. I would love to help with your journey. If the cost of living in Charlotte, North Carolina is interesting to you, you may find value in another video I posted on the channel about the cost of living in Charlotte, where I broke down all of the details in each one of those categories to let you know how much money you need to make if you live in Charlotte. Be sure to check out that video too. And if you're finding value in this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, share it with anyone you know who might be thinking about moving, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit the little bell so that you get notified every time I post new content. Another question we get a lot from people relocating to the Charlotte area is about the schools. People always want to know where are the best schools located and where they should enroll their children. Not long ago, I posted another video on the channel about the top 20 high schools in the Charlotte area based on an article from the Charlotte Business Journal. It's important to realize that different states have different processes when it comes to enrolling students in school and what school you're zoned for and what ratings the schools are getting. So it's important to note that when moving to the Carolinas, this may be different than what you're used to. So I do want to prepare you for that in advance, whether that be public schools, private schools, charter schools, STEM, magnet, lots of different varieties when it comes to your education needs. Some of the most notable high schools in the Charlotte area are Highland School of Technology in Gastonia, Ardrey Kell High School in Ballantyne, Community School of Davidson, obviously in Davidson, and Marvin Ridge High School in Waxhaw. Like I said, you can see the entire top 20 list on the video on my YouTube channel or on my map, which I will link in the description below. Beyond the high school education, we also have some great colleges and universities here in the Charlotte area. This map will also be linked in the description below, but just to go over a couple of those, of course, probably the most well-known is the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, UNC Charlotte. We have Davidson College, which is also very well-known, very popular private college. There's Belmont Abbey College and also Wingate University. Now, if you're trying to decide if any of these schools are a good fit for you and your family, I recommend a couple things. Number one is going online and checking the review sites. Keep in mind, they are not going to be the end-all be-all. It's not going to be the only thing you can do to research that school, but it will give you a good idea of what to expect. Some of these helpful sites that I recommend are School Digger, greatschools.org, niche.com, and publicschoolreview.com. Not only can you find rankings on these websites, but oftentimes you'll find reviews from parents and students as well. The second thing I recommend you do is jumping on to those community Facebook groups. Now, if you're thinking about moving to a specific area, it is perfectly fine to try to find those Facebook groups for the people who live in that area and ask questions. Oftentimes you'll get tons of responses from the people who already live in that area. One thing I try to remind people is to try to find a balanced perspective. What happens a lot is that people who have had a negative experience are going to be the loudest in these forums, much louder than people who have had a good experience. So just try to keep that in mind as you're searching. You are most likely going to receive a lot of negative reviews and fewer positives, and that is very common in these online forums. That being said, I still think it's a tremendous resource and a great place to start. Now, when it comes to lifestyle and recreation here in the Charlotte area, I think that we have everything you need to be happy. Whatever it is that you love to do, your hobbies, your activities, the things that bring you joy, you can find your people here. But the key is getting plugged in. It's a big city, so it can be easy to get lost in the shuffle, lost in the numbers. But if you make a dedicated attempt to get plugged in, you are going to find your people. What I mean by that is that sometimes you will have to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable and take steps to get you into these groups. Let me share an example from my life to let you know what I'm talking about. I absolutely love to read, and so joining a book club was something I knew I wanted to do to meet people and to make friends when we moved here. Now, there was not already a book club in my neighborhood, so I decided to start a book club so that other people who like to read could get together once a month and share food and drinks and talk about books. I also joined another group of ladies who were playing bunco once a month. Now, I had never even heard of bunco before. I'd never heard of it, didn't know what it was, but it's a very easy game to learn, and it is really fun to join with a group of ladies who are bringing like an appetizer or dessert once a month and getting together and playing a game together. Whether that's walking your dog, taking a bike ride, cooking, photography, whatever it is that brings you joy, just get plugged into a group that does it already or start your own. You'll be shocked to find out how many Facebook groups are already on Facebook dedicated to that activity. Besides that, we also have our professional sports teams in Charlotte, just like I mentioned earlier. So if you like football, you've got the Carolina Panthers. If you like baseball, we have a minor league baseball team, the Charlotte Knights. If you like soccer, we have Charlotte FC. We've got the Checkers playing hockey. We've got NASCAR. We've got the Hornets playing basketball. So we've got you covered on all of the sports that you can handle. If you like to be outside and go for walks or bike rides, we've got all of these greenways and trails that you can explore throughout the whole Charlotte region. And also, just like I mentioned earlier, you have all the lake activities. So if you like boating or jet skiing, if you like camping, swimming, we've got you covered there too. If you live in the north, then weather might be a big factor when making the decision to move to Charlotte. I totally get it. We moved here from Ohio. We had tons of snow. My husband will tell people we had 6 months of gray, gloomy weather every year. And the fact is, moving to Charlotte almost completely eliminates snow. We did not have any snowfall last year at all. So right now it's been like almost 2 full years since we've seen a snowflake in the Charlotte area. So snow is definitely not something that is commonly seen here in Charlotte. We do get it sometimes, so just keep in mind it's not completely snow-free. We had a cold spurt just recently where we had weather in the teens and 20s. Now, we didn't experience any snow on those days, but it was very cold. If we take a look at the climate in Charlotte, you can see what is commonly felt here in the Charlotte area when it comes to climate. Now, in the winter, we are typically seeing temperatures in the 40s and 50s. Right now, the high is 70 and it is January 25th. So it can vary greatly. And just like you would expect, we are going to have hot, muggy weather in July and August. This graph here just shows you what your average temperatures are going to be like throughout the year in Charlotte. Now, yes, in the middle of summer in July and August, you're going to be hitting 90 pretty commonly. And in December, January, you might be seeing some temperatures in the 30s and 40s. But based on this graph, you can see where the highs and lows typically fall throughout the year. If you are looking for a place where it is hot and humid year-round and it never gets cold, Charlotte may not be the right place for you. But if you're looking for a place where there's mild temperatures, it doesn't get crazy hot, it doesn't hit over 100 very commonly in the summer, and it does not get into the teens and 20s very much in the winter, then Charlotte might be a good fit. Besides that, we also don't experience much negative weather when it comes to hurricanes. Because Charlotte is a little bit off the coast, we are not typically getting much bad weather from hurricanes. If there's something that passes by us, we might experience some heavier rain than normal, but we're not usually experiencing these, major weather events that you would see on the coast. When it comes to the pros and cons of living in Charlotte, North Carolina, there is a lot to consider. And by the way, I also have a full video on the pros and cons of living in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I'll link for you so that you can take a look at that full video if you have more questions. One big pro to consider is the economic opportunity. Now, remember, like I said earlier, that right behind New York City is Charlotte, North Carolina when it comes to banking and financial hubs. So if you are in that industry, if you're in the banking and financial industry, then Charlotte, North Carolina might be the best place for you to be. Another huge pro is the cost of living. The fact is we are less expensive than the national average, meaning that about half of the country is living in a place more expensive than Charlotte, North Carolina. So this might be a great fit for you if you are thinking about moving from DC, San Francisco, New York City, or places like that. Another top pro for moving to Charlotte is our weather. We experience all 4 seasons in Charlotte, North Carolina, but the fact of the matter is we do not get very much snow, if any. If we do experience snow, it is likely going to be melted by noon. So if you're living in the north and right about now you're thinking the weather is terrible, I want to be in the sunshine, North Carolina, Charlotte might be a great place for you. We also get lots of calls from people who live in Florida because their summers are oppressive. And sometimes people do not like that overwhelming heat and want to move somewhere where it's a little milder. So Charlotte, being right in the middle area of the country, makes it a great fit for a lot of people. But Charlotte, North Carolina is not without its negatives. There are a couple cons I wanted to bring to your attention. Number one, you'll hear is traffic. And of course, depending on where you're moving from, the traffic might not be that bad. But for people who have lived here for a long time before the population started growing exponentially, the traffic they were used to was much different. So traffic can be an issue, especially during rush hour on like 485 or 74. So if that is something that bothers you, make sure you pay attention to where you're moving. Leading off of that is urban sprawl. Charlotte has gotten packed, and now the urban sprawl is moving outside of Charlotte and digging into those neighboring counties. So lots of people who live in those areas, maybe they purchased there or live there because they were more rural and slower paced, and now they're getting to be kind of like bedroom communities for the city. One more negative I want to share with you is the limited public transportation. So if you're moving here from a big city where public transportation is a necessity, then moving to Charlotte might really shock and surprise you because our public transportation is not as comprehensive as some of the other big cities. That means that Charlotte is a very car-dependent city. Most of the residents who live in and around Charlotte, North Carolina, will need to have access to a vehicle. So if you're thinking about moving to Charlotte, those pros and cons might play a part in your decision. If you have more questions that you need answered, don't hesitate to reach out. My information is down in the description below. And don't forget, there's even a link to my calendar. If you would like an appointment to get on a Zoom call with me, you can do that right through that link. The main goal is connecting your ideal lifestyle with the place in Charlotte that best fits you. And if nothing else, I'll at least help you get some of your questions answered. If you found value in this video, make sure to smash the like button and share it with someone else who might be thinking about moving to Charlotte. Hopefully it'll help make your decision a lot easier as you're making your journey to Charlotte. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.